I am speaking of education at a time when the taken for granted world, or what phenomenologists regard as our paramount reality, has collapsed. The coronavirus or the pandemic has made everything upside down. There is surveillance, normalcy is disturbed, there is social distancing, there is widespread fear, and death is very near and intimate. At this moment, how do we look at education, or how do we locate our location as teachers at this moment of crisis? I ask this question, and in the process of responding to this question, I wish to share some of my ideas with you. I know that a question of this kind has to be located if we understand three anxieties simultaneously. The first anxiety that characterizes large section of our students, their parents, students and the parents naturally at this moment of crisis are worried about the prospect of their children, about the students are worried about their future, how courses would be conducted, how they would get the degree, and likewise parents are worried about the future of their children. Similarly, our formal educational institutions, schools, colleges, universities, research centers, educational institutions are deeply worried about the time schedule, that how the semesters have to be ended, how the exams have to be conducted, students have to be awarded the degree, and time has to be saved. And the third thing here is about that then what do we do as teachers? Possibly in our times, a strange thing has happened to the self-perception of the teaching community. We have become cogs in a vast learning machine, or in the age of the market, we are mere service provider. As a result, institutions, academic administrators, techno managers, they constantly remind us that at this moment, we have to teach, we have to carry on our duty, and we have to evolve online teaching and learning, and we have to conduct classes online, give assignments to students, and do our duties. Now, this is something that saddens me, that worries me as a teacher and as someone who is deeply interested in creative pedagogy, in a deep communion and engagement with young learners and students. I tend to believe that as teachers, we are not mere service providers, or as teachers, we are not merely cogs in a machine. Our task is much more higher, and that's why it saddens me when we see that we have reduced the present crisis into only one technical question, that how we evolve merely online form of teaching and carry on the same task and the same duty, complete the same syllabus and complete the assignment and conduct the exams. This is something that I seek to problematize. And I seek to problematize it because this is an unusual time. The old normalcy has collapsed, and we are living in this unusual time with the new questions, new existential anxieties, and new sensibilities. And if education has to be meaningful, education has to be creative, it has to see beyond the official syllabus and the official curriculum and merely the routinized task of completing the syllabus and conducting the exam. Education has to address to the new reality, to the new questions that all of us are confronting at this crucial juncture of our time. To begin with, let me speak of the crisis that the coronavirus has led to. And it is in that context what comes to my mind is that, as I have just said, the taken for granted world has collapsed. And the taken for granted world that modernity created. And suddenly today, because of this invisible virus, we see the foundations of modernity seem to have crumbled. the modernist notion of order that, for instance, it empiricism, it technoscience, it rationality sought to create through its Baconian empiricism, through its Cartesian rationality, through industrialization, and through the gospel of unlimited technoscientific progress and human supremacy over biodiversity. Now that order we are seeing is crumbling. That certainty, that narcissism of modernity seems to be over. And suddenly we are realizing that we are just dust particles in this vast universe, and not everything can be predicted, not everything can be controlled, not everything is a mathematically precise, defined, technically controlled order. So this notion of order has crumbled. And the second thing that has happened, entire world, because of the lockdown as a safety measure, the outer activities have completely stopped. And as the outer has stopped, and so far we have been trained, our colleges, universities, formal educations have given us the skill to master the outer world with our knowledges, with our specialization, with our technical skills. Now the outer seems to have stopped, and we are now compelled to confront the inner world. And many of us are not trained, are not sufficiently sensitive, are not used to engage with the domain of the inner. And as a result, it has caused psychic boredom, psychic anxiety, nausea, mental restlessness. Almost many are living on the verge of psychic disorder. And there is associated ontological insecurity, existential anxiety, and also lockdown has led to a lot of economic anxiety many of us are experiencing. Anxiety of economic loss, anxiety of joblessness, and the anxiety about the future. So as a result, it has led to a new kind of crisis which has its severe impact on the polity, on human relationships, on the self. And it is in that context I could reflect on another dimension of the crisis that social distancing has led to. Already we live in a society which is characterized by high degree of hierarchy and exclusion and walls of separation. In a society of this kind, now coronavirus or the fear associated with the coronavirus seems to have become another excuse for intensifying the age-old practice of untouchability and exclusion. Our gated communities have closed their doors. Workers, migrant laborers are being seen as just useless objects since they have lost their jobs. They are treated with utter humiliation. They are stigmatized. And we also see simultaneously certain kind of middle class selfishness. Under these circumstances, we are living. And it is at this juncture, then the question arises, what is our role? How do we redefine education in these unusual times? As I have just said at the beginning, that what saddens me is that we are responding to the educational question merely through a technical angle. We are assuming that, as usual, the normal business would go on, and only thing that we have to do, we have to evolve the appropriate technology, we have to evolve the appropriate apps, and we have to go on online teaching and learning. This, I believe, is not an adequate and mature response to the question. The real issue is that how, as educationists, as teachers, we engage with young learners, we engage with ourselves, and we transform education not merely into official curriculum and syllabus, but we transform education into a liberating, a therapeutic act that copes with our mental, political, physical states of being at this moment and enables us to strive for a better world. And education emerges as certain kind of healing touch. And teachers, not just as cogs completing the syllabus and giving the assignments, teachers as fellow co-travelers, teachers as friends, teachers as wanderers, sensitive, reflexive, human teachers engage in an act of communion with young minds at this moment. This is something that we believe we have to reflect on. Just see for a second the absurdity that is going on. Only the other day, my niece from Dwarka informed me that as her son is in one of the fancy schools in that part of Delhi, and the child has to complete 40 pages of home assignment that night, and it has to be uploaded. The same mathematics, the same geography, the same history being taught mechanically, and children are bombarded with all sorts of home tasks, absurd projects, and teachers hardly engage with any of the anxieties many of these children who have been confined to their tiny apartments are experiencing. They are seeing their anxiety-ridden parents. They are seeing everything in the world has stopped. They see that the television channels are only speaking of the statistics of death, and fear is everywhere. And we are asking our children now to draw the area of the trapezium, or to engage in an age-old lesson in history, in geography, 10 reasons for the downfall of the Mughal Empire. This, I believe, is completely absurd. Likewise, the other day, a student of mine who teaches at a leading college in Delhi University, she told me, "Sir, I have to engage through the Zoom class with the BA pass course students and who have opted for sociology as a paper, and I have to teach them Pierre Bourdieu." Now, most of them in the first year have just come from the school, and already the Bourdieu's mystified language. And at this moment of turmoil, I am just teaching them Pierre Bourdieu without ever contextualizing it, without ever communicating with them that whether it makes sense at this moment when some of their parents are experiencing the problem of joblessness, there is anxiety, and some of them have also lost their loved ones because of the pandemic and because of the COVID-related death. So this, I believe, is violence, is absolutely absurd and insensitive. And that's why my final point, my submission is that, and that emerges out of self-critique. I keep asking myself, what is it then that as teachers we could do? Yes, we can come on the screen, it can be online, but what we do, the contents, the experiences, the engagement have to be talked about, not merely the technique and completing the age-old syllabus. And it is in this context, I just wish to share a couple of concrete pedagogic illustrations which I believe are absolutely important at this moment. I often tend to feel that at this moment, all of us are living with psychic, ontological, existential insecurity, uncertainty, and fear. Now, how do we make sense of the fear? We live with boredom. We are desperate that how we save time, how we utilize time, or how we waste time. Now, how we live with time, how we live with patience and endurance. At this moment, can these activities, faculties be cultivated? I myself right now feel the need for reading again and again Hemingway's Old Man and the Sea. You know, the story of endurance and determination. Now, if I come on the screen and engage with my young student, is it that just mechanically, without contextualizing my time, my psychic state of mind, the psychic state of students, just begin to teach absolutely mechanically the Durkheim's rules of sociological method or Weber's interpretative method if I am a teacher of sociology? Or if I begin with something that is happening to me? After all, education is a sensitivity to our time, to the state of consciousness we are passing through. And imagine how wonderful it would have been had one day, instead of teaching that age-old packaged knowledge that the syllabus asks us to confer, we just share with our students the story of Hemingway Old Man and the Sea. Or imagine one day, instead of teaching once again that snowball sampling as a professor of sociology, we initiate a conversation on Albert Camus' notion of the Sisyphus, and the way in the myth of Sisyphus, Albert Camus depicted that Greek mythological story and came to that fundamental existential question about fear, anxiety, meaninglessness, and the absurdity of existence. And it is in that context the way he invoked that story of Sisyphus. And together with Albert Camus' notion of the absurd, the meaninglessness, and the Sisyphus, we also invoke students, tell them the stories of the Upanishads and the stories relating to the notion of the self, or Buddha's last conversation with Ananda, when Buddha and Ananda are talking about death, Buddha's last moment, and Ananda is shedding tears, and Buddha asking Ananda that, Ananda, you have spent with me for decades. Don't you understand that all that is temporal fades away, passes away? What remains is the ultimate void, the infinite, the Buddhahood. So why are you crying? So what is it that is dying? What is death? And when we make sense of it, we engage with that, possibly we begin to acquire the psychic existential strength to engage with the inner, which today, because of the lockdown, because the outer has ceased to exist, this is a question all of us are confronting time and again. And it is in that context, I believe, that our educational sensibilities have to acquire a new meaning. I know, I do admit that students have to finish their semesters. I do admit that parents are worried, and I am also not against the online teaching. Only thing that I am talking about is that it is not just question about the techniques, about the means. The real issue is that what we teach right now, how we redefine education, and how we engage in a meaningful conversation with young learners. And that takes us to the ultimate question, that how as teachers we define ourselves. If we begin to see ourselves merely as paid employees, merely as service providers or cogs in a learning machine, then possibly we would not think of all these things. We would only report to the higher authorities and satisfy our school principals and the college principals and the university vice chancellors by saying that we are online, we have completed the syllabus, we have covered physics, biology, history, mathematics courses, and we have given them the assignments, and our task is over. This, to my mind, is absolutely absurd. Teachers are catalysts. Teachers are transformers. And teachers and students at this moment of turning point of human history ought to work together and collectively give each other moral, psychic, spiritual strength. To my mind, that is the fundamental spirit of liberating education, which at this crucial juncture we have to celebrate, we have to cultivate, we have to strive for. Thank you.